Hey, so I have a couple questions for you. Have you ever wondered why certain experiences stay with us long after they've happened, or why some people seem to just like bounce back or come back from certain challenges and some people struggle for years? Hey, y'all, I'm Dr. Andrea Michelle. I am a developmental psychologist and certified trauma sensitive coach and consultant. And today I'm going to break down the science of trauma, how it affects your nervous system, why our bodies react the way that they do, and what you can do to support your own healing. So, as I said, the answer to those questions I asked you earlier, it lies in our nervous system. And this is the body's built in alarm system that determines whether we feel safe or whether we feel threatened. So, if you've ever wondered about the nervous system and the role that it plays in our experience of trauma, stay tuned. So, what is trauma from a nervous system perspective? As I have said numerous times before, trauma is not just what happens, but it is how our nervous system responds, right? That's why two people can go through the exact same thing, and one person may develop trauma while the other person does not. And the reason why that is because it is not about the event itself, but it's about how our body and our nervous system processes that experience, right? So trauma can occur when our nervous system feels overwhelmed and unable to return to a state of safety. With that being said, though, this is why I don't necessarily believe in this idea as classifying our trauma as big T trauma or little t trauma, because the nervous system doesn't know how to discriminate between whether something is a little t trauma or a big T trauma. Our nervous system only knows that we are overwhelmed and we are not safe right now, and it responds to that. But when we classify our trauma as big T trauma and little t trauma, what we do is we minimize the impact that that event has had on us. And when we minimize the impact of that experience, then we minimize any opportunity we may have from fully healing from that experience because we're not fully recognizing it for what it is. Okay, y'all, to fully understand trauma, we need to talk about the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS, and that is the part that controls our survival responses. The ANS has basically two main branches. The first is the sympathetic nervous system, and that is what activates our fight or flight response. We've talked a lot about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses. And I can promise you that as I continue to talk about trauma and childhood trauma, I will continue to talk about those. But the sympathetic nervous system is what activates that response. The second is the parasympathetic nervous system, and this is what promotes rest, digestion, and recovery when we are in that survival mode. So I know I've said this before, but it is worth repeating because it is critical for us when it comes to really understanding trauma and then taking it a step further by healing from trauma. So trauma doesn't just affect our emotions, y'all. It rewires the brain completely, and it influences how we respond to the world around us, right? And there are three major areas that are affected by trauma. The first is the amygdala, and the amygdala is the fear center, right? It is that center that helps us to detect threats and triggers our survival response. So the second part that's affected by trauma, or I guess I should say another part, that's affected by trauma is the hippocampus. And this is the memory processor. And what it does is it helps us to distinguish between past threats and the present day. But what happens is the hippocampus shrinks with chronic trauma. And that can lead to flashbacks and difficulty distinguishing between the past and present. The third region of the brain that is affected by trauma is the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC. And this is the thinking brain. And this is what controls logic, decision making, emotional regulation, self regulation. And what happens during a traumatic experience is that the prefrontal cortex, as I said before, it literally goes offline. And it makes it extremely difficult and challenging to regulate your own emotions. And this is why trauma survivors or people who have experienced trauma, this is why it may appear that they overreact to something that seems really small, right? Or they feel emotionally overwhelmed over something that you're like, it's not that big of a deal. And the reason why they do this is because their nervous system is responding as if the original threat is actually happening now. And this is also one of the reasons why I typically try not to use the word overreact when people respond to something. Part of it is because I am trauma sensitive, and I fundamentally believe that almost everyone has experienced some sort of trauma. But I believe that when people react to things, that they're reacting from a place that for them it feels true, right? And so I typically don't say, oh, this person overreacted, because I don't know, they could be having a trauma response. And if you remember from some of the other videos that I shared, you can have a trauma response to a threat that is real or imagined. And so I typically don't say that someone has overreacted. I believe that people react from a place that feels real and feels true for them. Let's talk about why trauma gets stuck in the body. And this is critically important for us to understand. Trauma is not just in the mind. It is not in your head. It gets stored in the body. And if the stress response isn't fully processed, it stays trapped in our nervous system, and it can lead to devastating symptoms such as chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, panic attacks. We can experience emotional numbness, exhaustion, dissociation. And let me just speak to emotional numbness very briefly. I'm not going to hold you. I struggled with emotional numbness for a very long time, and I didn't realize that I was emotionally numb. One day I will share with you my experience of getting married, giving birth to two amazing children, and not feeling anything. So emotional numbness is a real thing. Um, we have we can have difficulties trusting others or feeling safe. And as I mentioned previously, we can have unexplained physical symptoms like headaches, gut issues, sometimes chronic pain. And if I can just put something in perspective, when we think of animals, right, in the animal kingdom, when they are chased by, when a prey is chased by a predator, right, and they're threatened, they have an opportunity to shake off whatever it is that they're feeling in the animal kingdom, right? But with humans, with us, what often happens is we don't get a chance to complete that trauma response, right? When something traumatic happens to us, and sometimes we will shake. And if we are surrounded by people, well-meaning people, they will basically tell us to calm down, stop shaking. And what happens is when we do that, when we stop shaking or when we stop that process, it gets stuck in the body, it stays there, and it leads to chronic dysregulation. And so when you are with someone and they are going through something and you see them shaking or whatever it is, let them complete the process, because that is all of that energy, all of that adrenaline, or whatever else is associated with that experience, that is working its way through the body. And when you stop them from processing that, that trauma is stuck in the body. And so even you yourself, when you experience something traumatic, I can't tell you how many experiences that I've had as an adult where it was just so overwhelming for me, where my body shook uncontrollably. And my husband, well meaning, was like, oh my gosh, Andrea, you're shaking, calm down, settle down, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I can't, I have to let this process, I have to let this go through. And that experience, which was extremely devastating for me, it didn't present as trauma because I allowed the process to continue, and I didn't let it get stuck in my body. And so, again, if you are working with someone and you see them shaking uncontrollably, let them finish that process, because that is the trauma moving through their bodies. Now, the question becomes, how do you regulate and heal your nervous system? The good news is there are a number of things that you can do, right? Your traumatic experiences don't have to rule your life. Healing is 100% possible for you. So, some of the things that you can do is engage in breath work and mindfulness meditation. But I want to provide a cautionary tale about breath work. When you get into deep breathing, especially for someone who has experienced abuse or sexual trauma, and they've dissociated from their bodies, if you haven't made that connection of dissociation from the body, and you jump right into breath work without having someone who is trauma sensitive or trauma informed, it can trigger you. It can be triggering, and you can have a trauma response. And so, if you do want to engage in breath work or mindfulness or anything that takes you within your body, just make sure you're doing it with someone who is trauma sensitive or trauma informed. Another way to heal and regulate your nervous system is through movement, shaking, yoga, stretching. All of these things can help release the trauma that is actually stored in the body. Probably one of the most important things for you to do to help you regulate and heal your nervous system is safe relationships. To me, having safe relationships, being surrounded by people who make you feel safe and supported, is critical to your healing journey. Do everything that you can to surround yourself by people who make you feel safe, who make you feel at peace. Because when you do not have a sense of safety, when you do not have this sense of trust, you cannot heal. And healing happens when we are in connection with other people, because we are social beings. And in order for us to survive and thrive, we need to be connected with other people. So surround yourself with people who make you feel safe. And finally, go to therapy. Y'all, there are so many different healing modalities that exist for you nowadays that have been proven to help you heal from your trauma. EMDR, CBT, IFS. There's lots of different somatic therapy that you can use to help reset your nervous system. You do not have to struggle alone. You do not have to process your trauma alone. There is help available for you. All you have to do is reach out for it, right? Decide that healing is something that you want for yourself, and go for it. So, now that you understand how trauma affects the nervous system, I would love to know what stood out to you. And, have you noticed that what your own stress response is, right? Do you notice that you predominantly, fight? Do you run away? Do you freeze, or do you fawn? Do you negotiate with whatever that threat is? I would love to hear from you. Drop your comments below. Please share this video with anyone who you think can benefit from this. And I'm just going to keep informing y'all about trauma, childhood trauma, the effects of it, how it affects our nervous system, self-regulation, and all things related to trauma, because that's just what I do.